Hello, YouTube. So I was all excited to take you along to go look at a property in Ecuador today. I've made a few different videos about real estate in Ecuador, sometimes just talking about the process, sometimes taking you along to look at, what kind of properties go for what price, what's available, what the market's like. Not the main theme of my channel, but every once in a while it's a fun, different type of video to make. But my plans changed, and I'm going to explain why. Instead, I'm making a video about two different topics, two things. One, I'm making a video about driving in Ecuador, and I'm doing that in part because already this year, already in January, I have had two fender benders. I've been hit twice, and I've also just today almost gotten in two accidents. But the other thing going on, and it is very closely related to driving in Ecuador, and that is crime in Ecuador. It is something that it is a part of driving here. So I'm going to talk about these two things. I'm going to talk about what's going on. I'm going to explain why I didn't go look at this property, what happened. So here we go. So first, driving. Most tourists and expats here in Ecuador don't buy or rent a car because two reasons. Two is coming up a lot in this video. Two reasons. One, both renting and buying are relatively expensive here. The other reason is because driving is hectic. It is dangerous. I consider driving in Ecuador to be a contact sport. And to illustrate this, let me tell you what's happened to me so far this year. I have on the back of the car that I bought a few months ago, I've got a bike rack, one of those bike racks that fits into the trailer hitch and folds up. And so it was January 2nd. I traveled with the family on January 1st to Mindo. Right after the holiday, I drove to Mindo, Ecuador, which is a little tourist town. And on January 2nd, I was sitting in my car outside of a hotel sleeping. I was doing that because the family was swimming in the pool and I was exhausted because of the holidays, and I didn't want to sleep by the side of the pool and get eaten by mosquitoes. The mosquitoes were pretty bad, so I was sleeping in the car. And all of a sudden the car lurched forward. I got out, realized I'd been rear-ended. It looks like what had happened was a car was parked right behind me. The guy jumped in. He must have just gunned it without looking and ran directly into the bicycle rack on the back of my car. He said he didn't see it, but it sure looked like from the accident where he hit it, where it hit his car. If it hadn't been there, he would have just slammed into the back of my car. So I was thankful I had it. This being Ecuador, my first concern was somehow, some way, people would think it was my fault. And immediately, when he said he didn't see it, I just clammed up, crossed my arms, stood there and waited. And he realized real quickly that I wasn't going to say something wrong, and that it was going to be really hard for him to make it my fault. And so, and the other thing working in my favor, he was not Ecuadorian. He was from Spain based on his accent. So the guy just said, all right, I'm going to go. Right? My bicycle rack was slightly bent, but there was very little damage to my car, or none to my car, just to the bicycle rack. Significant damage to his car. And so I didn't care. I definitely didn't want to deal with the Ecuadorian police. So he jumped in his car and took off, and I was relieved. So a little wake-up call, a little disconcerting, but no real harm, no foul. But the very next day, I don't know what's going on, but the very next day, drove back to Quito. I needed to get out to my farm because I hadn't been out there for a few days. I needed to water plants and check on things. And so I was on my way out of the city of Quito, and there's a big 2-lane roundabout that I have to navigate. It's a very hectic, high traffic, what I would consider to be a dangerous roundabout. So I am trying to fight my way into the roundabout. There's a car in the lane next to me trying to fight their way into the roundabout. There's a car in the roundabout signaling to exit, and they start to exit. Now, driving in Ecuador, you can't be timid. When you have an opportunity to go, you got to go. And so as I saw them start to exit, I entered the roundabout, and I did it, the way you've got to here. I stepped on it to get into the roundabout, and they changed their mind. Right? So they started to exit and changed their mind and swerved back into my lane, forcing me to avoid a collision with them to make a panic swerve into the lane next to me. Now, I had just enough time to check my blind spot and then turn. But there's a column towards the back of my car that causes me to not have the best visibility. I checked the blind spot. That car that was in the lane next to me, I didn't see him. So I did just a super abrupt, reflex turn into that lane. And right after I did so, I got hit from behind. Right? So I swerved in front of him. I had enough room to get into that lane, but they were going faster than I was. And so they ran into my bicycle rack, right? Now, I pulled over. I got out. This lady got out. This time I was dealing with a Ecuadorian lady. And of course, she immediately says, "You ran into me." Right? And I'm like, "Well, how did I run into you when you hit me from behind?" Right? I wasn't driving in reverse. It's just that I did a sudden lane change in front of you and you couldn't or didn't hit the brakes. Right? So I think in a reasonable place, technically this would be her fault. But my maneuver wasn't terribly reasonable. Fault wasn't entirely clear. And I didn't like my chances or what would happen if the police came, and neither did she. So funny thing is, and part of how this ties into crime, one of the first things she said to me is, "Thank you for not robbing me." Right? Apparently, she got into another fender bender recently, and all that happened was the other driver just jumped out and robbed her. So this is what's going on in Quito. So yeah, I decided that the best option was to pay her what I had in my wallet to make the whole thing go away, even though I believe it was her fault. Here's why. So I'm a gringo. I'm an expat, a foreigner in Ecuador. The courts and the police are immediately going to favor her. Her story is it's my fault. My story is it's her fault, but I do believe I had partial responsibility because I swerved in front of her. Now, I didn't really have a choice about that. I had to evade someone else, but it is what it is. And what I have heard from a few different people, so I do believe it is true, though I haven't 100% confirmed it, is that if you can't come to terms in the event of a car accident, if you can't just immediately on the spot make it right, and you have to deal with the police, that everyone goes to jail. That the system here is everyone goes and they sit in jail until the courts can sort out who is responsible, and then the responsible party has to financially make it right before they get released. So there is potential that during the New Year's holidays, when the courts are closed, that we all could have been going to jail, and jail is the last place that you want to be in Ecuador, especially right now. And this ties in to crime. Actually, let me hold up a minute and explain the other two almost accidents that happened today while I was on my way to go look at this property. So let me just get the driving out of the way. So I'm driving to a place called Cali, and I'm supposed to meet this seller of this 5 hectares that I found on Facebook Marketplace, at the gas station. And so I'm driving along, and there's a point where I've got to make a left off a road called the Ruta Escondida. And for some reason, the very impatient car behind me, despite the fact that I'm signaling left, this guy decides he's going to go around me on my left, right? He's going to go around me on my left in an intersection while I'm slowing down to turn, while I'm signaling. So almost had an accident there like that. And the other incident, probably I was just being impatient. I've been in Ecuador. I've been driving in Ecuador for a long time. And the way people drive here does start to rub off on you. And I may have gotten a little too aggressive. So I'm driving up this long, windy hill. I'm behind a big truck. the big truck is going very, very, very slow. And they are not taking one lane, they're driving right in the middle, right? So I'm signaling to go past them. I finally get a long, straight stretch. There's no double yellow lines, there's no dotted lines, there's no nothing. There's, it's just this weird little road. And I honk to let them know, hey, I'm going to come around you because you're driving incredibly slow. And they look like they're going to move over out of the way. They start to. And because I've only got a small straight stretch, I kind of punch it to get around them. Well, they swerve back right to the middle, push me into the kind of the ditch on the side of the road, and I just hit the power through to get past them. So those are my 2 accidents and my 2 almost accidents. And then I make my way out to this gas station. Now, I got there early, was kind of scoping it out, and wanted to send a message to this person that I've been talking to through Facebook Messenger about their ad and let them know I got there early and who to look for. So I go to send him a message and the ad is gone. I can't send him a message because the Facebook ad is been deactivated. It doesn't show sold. It just shows that the ad's been removed. It's no longer available. I think that's odd because I watch Facebook Marketplace a lot. This was not an old ad. It was new. It didn't just expire. And so, I look and I see there's a way to actually look at the profile of this person from the conversation. I go to their profile. The profile's been deleted, right? So now, while this is happening, I'm noticing there's a little bit of weird activity around the gas station. There's just there's a few different people that are just hanging out. And none of them look particularly sketchy, though there is one guy that, he looks clean cut, but he's got arms like he spent the past 10 years lifting weights in a jail, right? So I'm looking at that and I've got this little funny feeling and the hair just stands up on the back of my neck. And this is coinciding with, there's been a lot of crime in Ecuador, and all of a sudden things just went off the hook last night and today. So the government had declared a state of emergency because of the crime. And the mafias, the gangs, had decided that they would respond in kind and declared war on the government. They kidnapped 3 police from the coastal city of Machala and 1 from Quito, from my city. And the 3 from Machala appeared on a video with a gun pointed to their heads, reading a statement saying, if the government wants a war, they'll give them a war. And the mafias declared an 11 p.m. curfew and said that all police, military, and civilians are fair game. They'll either be kidnapped or killed if they're out on the street after 11, right? So the government, of course, escalated further, and schools, at least my kid's school, is shut down. A bunch of the stores are closed. It is a big escalation in the crisis of crime in Ecuador. So that's happening, and something just doesn't feel right with this meetup for looking at this property, and I just get a funny feeling. So I did not go look at that property. I didn't wait around for the guy. I couldn't message him, and I decided it just wasn't worth the risk. Something felt wrong. So I skedaddled. I got the hell out of there. So I'm leaving, and I get stuck at this stoplight, right? I get stuck at this stoplight where I've got a bus in front of me. I've got 3 motorcycles with 2 people up on each one behind me, which, I can't remember exactly the rules, whether it's not allowed to have 2 people on motorcycles or if it's just after a certain hour. But there's, a lot of warnings and rules around that because that's a common method for carjacking. It's also a common method for assassinations, for murders and drive-bys here in Ecuador right now. And so I'm looking at the situation, and I've got no out. There's no escape driving, and there's a dude with a ski mask, right? So there's this dude with a ski mask, clearly not any sort of police or security person, because he just doesn't have the look. Even with the ski mask, the one feature I can tell is he's got a really weird mustache, and he's dressed like a bum, right? So, and he's walking a dog, right? So there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance here, right? Like, if you're going to rob somebody, if you're going to carjack somebody, you don't use a dog in traffic, right? Like, it's just not the weapon of choice. All it does is add chaos to the situation. But who knows? Who knows what's going on? But he's cutting between the bus and me. He's walking right in front, and then he walks right by my window, and I'm like, oh, well, this sucks, right? This looks like I'm about to get carjacked. This doesn't look right. And, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I take a lot of risks. I don't get spooked real easily. But man, today something in the air is not right. And so I'm nervous about the situation, but I can see there's no out. There's nothing to do other than turn over the car if he wants to carjack me, or turn over my wallet and phone, whatever. Right. So I'm sitting there, and he walks past me, and he goes and he shakes the hand of one of the drivers, the first driver of the motorcycle right behind me, and chats with him for a minute. And then the bus goes, and I go, nothing happens. I was just panicking. I got the jitters, right? Just because of everything that's going on. It takes a lot to give me the jitters. I mean, for the better part of my time there, I stayed pretty cool and collected in Afghanistan. So if Quito, Ecuador is causing me to be nervous right now, something's going on. So, man, this video, it's getting a little long. What else did I have to say here? So, crime in Ecuador, when I first moved here, it's not that there was no crime, it's just the nature of the crime was nonviolent. Occasional pickpocketing, occasional snatching a bag off a bus, but violent crime was extremely rare, and that has definitely changed. And you can feel it. You can feel it. You can see it in the news every day. A lot of people like to pretend that these news reports are way overblown, but there's a Telegram group called Noticias de Ecuador, and if you see how many incidents of targeted assassinations between gang members, or the violence used against businesses as extortions become really common, and how frequently gangs are not just using pistols, not just using guns, but using explosives, using car bombs. I think there were a couple just today, or there were a few in Esmeraldas and one or two in Quito, Ecuador. This is not your typical mafia crime. This is more like terrorism. The government's calling it narco-terrorism. I would call it narco-terrorism. This is more like what was happening in Colombia when when Pablo Escobar blew up an airline, right? This is something else. Does that mean you should avoid Ecuador? I don't know if I'd come here this week, but I would still visit. I would just pay close attention to what's going on. Does it mean you shouldn't invest or buy real estate in Ecuador? Some people would say absolutely. There's a lot of expats, gringos, that are selling their properties right now. There's a lot of locals that are selling their properties to try to pay to get out of Ecuador one way or another. But within chaos, there is opportunity. And there are a lot of people, myself included, that would argue that that is the best moment to buy. The best moment to buy is during a crisis when prices go down. But you do have to be fairly, what is the opposite of risk averse? You have to be a risk taker to follow such a strategy, and you got to be pretty brave and not get scared off. You don't want to buy a property cheap and then sell it even cheaper because you got intimidated. So yeah, that's what's going on in Ecuador with the driving situation and with the crime situation. Those are my updates for today. Peace out.